takes more than being online to be a great online university. It takes time and experience. University of New England pioneered distance education in the 1950s and has been perfecting it ever since. With features like 24/7 tutor access, we're now rated #1 for teaching quality and support, and the only public university in Australia to receive a 5-star rating 14 years running. So, for an expert online education, choose UNE.
So hello, Warrick. Thank you for agreeing to be interviewed for Law 499. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Thanks, Michael. Great to be here. And it's actually great to be back on campus virtually, being a former UNE grad, but long before they had the law degree. So my role, I'm the CEO at Common Gregg Lawyers. I've been in professional services for heading into 25 years now in terms of general manager and CEO roles. Common Gregg, 130 staff, based in Western Sydney, 5 offices, all in Sydney, and a really good mix of commercial services and personal services. So we tend to look after subsidiaries and multinats, larger family businesses, state government clients, and specialise in family law, tax and estate planning.
Oh, thanks, Warrick. That's a great summary. I also want to disclose I'm actually a consultant with Common Gregg. They are a great law firm. And in fact, I had the pleasure of teaching Warrick when he was doing his MBA, so a few years ago. So again, a nice connection. But thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it, how busy it's been with the transition to technology for a major commercial law firm. All right, let's get down to the 3 questions. The first one is, what do you see as the crucial issues relating to new developments or innovations in new technologies?
Yeah, I think, look, there's a variety of things, Michael. From a technical viewpoint, I suppose one of the first things that we've always focused on is data sovereignty and where that data sits. Because again, most of the new legal technologies sit in the cloud, and they're very much software as a service. So again, for us early on, particularly when some of the US products were coming here to the Australian market, was just understanding where their data sat. And again, I think being able to understand the commerciality of that contract that you're jumping into with the provider, particularly if they're a startup or they're an established business. There are so many legal startups in terms of legal tech at the moment. The last stat I think I saw was back in October, and I haven't got an updated one since then, but I think there's something like over 1,400 legal tech startups globally. And interestingly, a lot of the money that's funding that is coming from private equity. So PE obviously sees some opportunity in the market, and that level of disruption that's happening in the market, I think, is significant. I think for a firm like ours, it's really reviewing sort of the T's and C's and making sure from a contractual point of view that our clients are protected, because ultimately we're dealing with our clients' data. And I think in terms of when we've sought to take on new legal tech, it's generally been targeted at those individuals within the practice that kind of have an inquisitive mind, can see the end outcome of what they're going to deliver for the client in a much more productive or seamless way for the client. And I think you've got to have a level of sort of persistence. This stuff in terms of implementation is never easy, but I think if you have a logical mind and can think logically, the ability to translate what some software salespeople sell sometimes as vaporware into reality can be done a whole lot easier. But again, I think, particularly some of the challenge for lawyers, particularly, they like to get everything right. They don't like to fail. When you're implementing particularly disruptive technology, you're going to have to expect to dust yourself off and get up from time to time, because you're not going to win every time you roll something out.
Thanks, Warrick. That makes a lot of sense. And in fact, the second question gives a chance to unpack some of those particular issues. So the question is, what do you specifically see as some of the common issues relating to specific new technologies? And I've suggested, because it's part of our course, blockchain, big data, artificial intelligence, chatbots, and social media, or in fact any other ones that you might consider. What are some of the ones that you face, some of the new technologies, and issues?
Yeah, look, I think in terms of the AI and chatbot, I was only talking about this the other day on a hookup. There's been a lot of promises and a lot sold to the profession, but I think it's going to be a slow journey. AI is not the panacea. It may be over time, but it's not going to give us that instant hit that I think we all want. Particularly in terms of contract review, AI is certainly getting better and it continues to improve, but it's going to be at least a 5-year journey, I think. In terms of the chatbot piece, interestingly, we've started using that in the last 6 months in particular areas of law. So again, in terms of that engagement, I think the interesting thing is that the business of law operates 24/7 because your clients and your prospective clients want to understand and want to access you that way. So chatbots really provide that opportunity, I suppose, to engage with your marketplace when you may not be physically available or within the office. In terms of the social media piece, Michael, I've personally been a long standing user of social media, and I think particularly anyone worth half their salt is active on social media, because again, I think particularly with probably the students, some of the students you're teaching, if they're sort of 20, 21, 22, for many of them, they've been brought up on social media. So again, if you don't have a social media presence, both for yourself professionally and also I think for the business, that sort of sends alarm bells. I think the challenge for particularly graduates coming out of law degrees these days is, and it's fantastic that you guys are actually doing this subject, I think is really understanding and grappling with the available technologies out there. And I'll give you an example in really practical terms. We've used a product, it's a precedent automation product. We've used that tool for 20 years. It's been great. But the way in which that was designed was probably, it's 30 years old now, that architecture, and ultimately trying to mesh the new way of doing things and trying to capture data and reuse data, and capture it once and reuse that data over and over again, because in practical terms, a lot of what law firms do is manage that data. So what law firms I think have got to get better at is managing and in an appropriate way mining that data, because again, for many law firms, that data still is very transactional. It's looked at in the scope of each particular transaction, but I think where the real opportunity is to look more holistically at that data that you have, that data set you have for a client, and understand what that's actually telling you. So again, I think that's where the big opportunity is to add value down the track.
Thank you, Warrick. No, that makes a lot of sense. So my last question is, over the next 5 to 10 years, that sort of time frame, what do you think will be some of the biggest issues in future technologies?
Look, I think, we're sort of recording this just prior to Easter in 2020, Michael, and the changes that have happened in the profession because of COVID-19, the move to working from home, the sort of semi-lockdown that we're all currently going through here in Australia at the moment, the amount of change that's happened in the profession in the last 3 weeks has quite frankly been mind-blowing. Really exciting for a person like me, because sometimes I get frustrated because I go, it's 2020 people, why can't we do it this way? And look, I think part of that has been, don't ever let a good crisis go to waste. And I think, in order to continue to operate, to keep the wheels of justice turning, the courts particularly and the Attorney General departments throughout the country have really had to scramble to ensure that life can go on. And I think sometimes that means bringing the bench and the bar, kicking and screaming to some of those changes. So I think, ironically, this experience that we're all going through now, there will be light at the end of the tunnel, but I think it will be a moment in time for many, many industries, not just law, where things change forever. I think the challenge will be then really looking at, Michael, I think the haves and the have-nots, because again, I think there will be a big divide in terms of the profession, and I think the challenge will be, particularly for some of those smaller firms, how they continue to engage as the courts have moved forward quite dramatically in terms of the way they deliver their services and utilising legal tech to be able to do that. I think as I mentioned earlier, you've got to have a particular mindset. You've got to be focused on it. And again, I think the profession has allowed many traditional ways of working to continue, but this change that we're going through now in terms of COVID-19, we'll see, I think, some dramatic changes happen in the profession. So again, I think for some of your students, it'll be a really, if they do end up in the profession, it'll be a really exciting time. And again, I think, as I mentioned earlier, those people who've got a real ability to think logically will really benefit from some of the legal tech that's out there, because some of it is, particularly for firms our size, is now really quite easily digestible, reasonably priced, and a great way to service your clients.
Thank you, Warrick. I really appreciate your time and your insights today. You have a great day.
Thanks, Michael. Appreciate it.